The Star Wars franchise is long, but it has been condensed quite a lot over the last few years. With Disney purchasing Star Wars, they removed a lot of the extra Legends content from the universe and started to create their own stuff. Television shows are a great place to start, so let's cover the complete timeline of all of the Star Wars TV series. Star Wars: The Acolyte, 132 BBY. The release date for this Star Wars project has yet to be announced, but much has already been revealed about Star Wars: The Acolyte. It was confirmed that this project would be set around 100 years before Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace, meaning that it will be one of the earliest projects in the timeline in terms of a television series. The time frame they've hinted at places The Acolyte during the High Republic's final years, thus making it the first chronological Star Wars series. Star Wars has been diving into the Republic era over the last few years, but the period ranges from 300 BBY to 82 BBY. Though this era has been touched on through its various comic book and novel adaptations, Star Wars: The Acolyte will be the first live-action Star Wars production to go that far back during the Star Wars timeline. The only other thing that we know about it is that Emmy-nominated executive producer and writer Leslie Headland will headline the series, and the show is reportedly going to be a mystery thriller genre about the rising influence of the dark side throughout the galaxy. Star Wars: Tales of the Jedi, to be determined. The most recent Star Wars television series comes up next in the video. It's a project that focuses on the lives of important Jedi throughout the prequel era. The first season had around 6 episodes, 3 dedicated to Ashoka Tano and a younger Count Dooku before he was turned into a Sith. Because Star Wars: Tales of the Jedi explored different moments from both characters, it's hard to say where it takes place in the timeline. Each 3-episode section includes lives from the youth of these characters as well as Oshoka's childhood, so it's impossible to say what part of the timeline this show is explored. That being said, the show featured many events from before The Phantom Menace until the time of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, meaning that we have to place it here in today's video. In the future, we'll get more concrete dates as more evidence comes out, but right now, the timeline of the Tales of the Jedi is to be decided. Star Wars: The Clone Wars, 22 BBY to 19 BBY. The weirdest thing about the prequel-era movies was that George Lucas decided to skip over the Clone Wars. This was one of the most highly anticipated parts of the early Star Wars film, and surprisingly, wasn't explored in live action. Instead, a few years later, it was explored with the release of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which would run for 7 seasons following the conflict. The show follows various groups of characters at different points in the Clone Wars, but mainly focuses on other clone troops, the Jedi, and Anakin and Obi-Wan. Throughout the 3 years of the Clone Wars, many different storylines are going on, and this series had a lot of things to cover. Though the vast majority of the series comprises self-contained chapters of the war and are interchangeable, watching the show chronologically gives us a much better watching experience. In fact, during the series' later seasons, we get to see the storyline of Ashoka's departure from the Order and Darth Maul's Mandalorian takeover, which would span around 4 or 5 episodes. It's hard to place Clone Wars chronologically due to the random nature of the series, but in terms of where the vast majority of the show is placed, it's just before Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith, as the finale takes place concurrently with it. Star Wars: The Bad Batch, 19 BBY until time to be determined. Star Wars: The Bad Batch is another one of the most recent Star Wars television series and starts just after the finale of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. This is a Clone Wars spin-off series focused on Clone Force 99 and begins with Order 66 through the eyes of the Bad Batch. They then go on an unusual adventure as we follow this group of clones in the first days of the brand new galactic empire. It's been officially announced that the Bad Batch will return for a second season, so we don't know where it will end up in the timeline by the time it finishes. The series is likely going to get closer and closer to the events of Star Wars Rebels, as well as Star Wars Rogue One. As of now, no clones from the Bad Batch have been in any other Star Wars movies or shows, meaning that they most likely end up dead or away from the main canon storylines as we get closer to Star Wars Rebels. Obi-Wan Kenobi, 9 BBY. Obi-Wan Kenobi is set just 10 years after the events of the Revenge of the Sith, so it takes place 9 years before the beginning of A New Hope. This is why, during the series, Obi-Wan Kenobi isn't as old as he will be when he turns into Alec Guinness, and why Luke and Leia are still children in the series. The 9 BBY time frame means that Obi-Wan can serve as a perfect transition into the original trilogy and from the prequel trilogy, as it allows the audience to have a better connection to the story of Obi-Wan and Anakin before they're presented in the original trilogy. During the series, we get to see a very crazy power dynamic between the two and see how Obi-Wan views his previous apprentice. It was thought that before A New Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi hadn't seen Anakin Skywalker since he left him on Mustafar, but it turns out that they had met on several occasions. The two have a few fights with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Obi-Wan ends up besting Anakin during one of their battles. This is where Obi-Wan truly gives up on Anakin Skywalker as he sees that Anakin is gone and Darth Vader lives. He has failed his apprentice, and it kicks off one of the franchise's biggest rivalries. Andor, 5 BBY to 0 BBY. Andor is a spin-off series of Rogue One that has just recently wrapped up and is set 5 years before the film's events film. It follows Cassian Andor, who dies at the end of Rogue One, as he is the central character of this spy thriller set in the early years of the rebellion. Cassian Andor is an experienced rebel spy at the time audiences meet him in Rogue One, but undershows him during some of his early days and how he becomes the character he is. And there has been confirmed to be getting another season, as it will lead up to Rogue One itself, meaning that the final moments of Andor will most likely intersect with the beginning of Rogue One. It's going to be an awesome moment intertwined, as Rogue One is one of the biggest moments within the Star Wars franchise. Star Wars Rebels, 5 BBY to 0 BBY. The next Star Wars project talked about in today's video is Star Wars Rebels, as it's also set 5 years before the Battle of Yavin and follows another part of the Star Wars franchise during the early years of the rebellion. The biggest difference is that this 2012 show focuses on a small crew of rebels that were not initially connected to the larger Rebel Alliance. It's only through several events in the series that they're connected to the wider Rebel Alliance and even intertwine as the crew appears within Rogue One. We're also supposedly getting Hera, one of the bigger characters in the series, and their lovable droid Chopper. Star Wars Rebels is a massive series with characters such as Ashoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, and Darth Maul. The series will also be a massive part of the Ashoka project next year, as many of these characters will appear in that project. Finally, The Mandalorian, 9 ABY until time to be determined. Finally, the last show we'll cover in today's video is The Mandalorian, as it takes place 5 years after the return of the Jedi and the fall of the Empire. This is 9 years after the Battle of Yavin, meaning it takes place in 9 ABY and will continue until an undisclosed year. And that's all we have from today's video about the Star Wars television series timeline. We didn't have time to mention a few of these series, such as The Book of Boba Fett, Ashoka, The Skeleton Crew, and Star Wars Resistance. All these series occur after The Mandalorian and even into the era of the sequel trilogy. The Star Wars franchise is long and very convoluted, but it's an awesome franchise nonetheless, and we hope this video helped you understand how things played out. And that's the end of today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed this latest video. If you did, please let us know in the comment section below. It would be very helpful. Make sure to like the video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel with the notification bell rung. Thank you for watching today's video. Goodbye.